Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers. I'm Murray Darm. I'm the assistant editor of Ancient Warfare magazine. I'm again flying solo to answer this question from the same person I answered the question from last time, Micius, if we're saying that right, who's a follower on Patreon. Don't forget, you also can follow us on Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/Ancient Warfare Podcast. You can back us at 3 different levels and get a copy of the magazine and even a print copy of the magazine if you like. And you can, of course, ask us a question about ancient warfare. And we will attempt to answer it if we have the knowledge. This question that I'm being asked today is, do you think the Grass Crown was rarely a rare award, or it just wasn't written about for whatever reason? Now, the Grass Crown, and I did have some conniptions about answering this question because, of course, in Latin, the crowns, which are awards that the Romans give for conduct on the battlefield, are called the coronae. And so the Grass Crown is actually called the Corona Gramineia. So at this point in our lives in 2022, talking about coronas and things like that as a positive might be a bit triggering. But anyway, the coronas are these various rewards that the Romans give for different field of things on the conduct on the battlefield. So the Corona Gramineia is the Grass Crown. It's the rarest, and it's awarded to a general who saves an entire army. It's only awarded 9 times in the history of the Roman Republic. And to answer the question, yes, I think it is that rare, because for you to be considered to have rescued an entire army would require a sort of a set of circumstances that most battles wouldn't reach, they wouldn't qualify for. So it's the highest honor. Several authors talk about how rare it is that we get this. And the funny thing, of course, is that there's a whole series of rewards from the Roman troops. So you have filari, which are these sculpted discs of metal that are worn on the dress armor of the soldiers, and we've found some in graves. And they may even have been worn in the field, we're not sure. You have others that could be awarded to the entire unit and displayed on the standards of that unit. And of course, this is very similar to what comes in the 19th century in terms of military honors, and indeed even in medals today, in terms of the gradient of which is the most important or rarest medal, all the way down to a medal that's relatively common. And so you have, in Roman terms, you've got the Corona Gramineia, which is the rarest and highest ranking. Below that, you've got what's called the Corona Civica, which is the civic crown, and that's awarded to a Roman who has saved the life or lives of his fellow citizens. So again, and I don't want to draw too many parallels, but talking about Victoria Crosses or a DSO, a Distinguished Service Order, there are lots and lots of people who are being given a Distinguished Service Order who you can go, why didn't they get a Victoria Cross? That's a bit strange. And I think that in the Roman terms, you could even have the same thing, that you could have someone who had saved the lives of fellow citizens, but on a technicality, someone might, but they didn't save the whole army, did they? No, so they get the Corona Civica, they don't get the Corona Gramineia. The deed of saving the life of a fellow citizen needed to be witnessed by someone. You couldn't just say you'd done it, which again, we still have with the Victoria Cross. There's only Albert Ball, I think, is the only person who got a Victoria Cross on their own evidence. Generally, someone else had to see it happening, which is quite remarkable. You have a set of rules from Sulla onwards, so the late Roman Republic, 1st century BC, where Sulla requires any recipient of one of these crowns to wear it in public. And again, like some of the medals today, that person had to be honored regardless of who saw them, that they were honored and paid tribute to by someone even of a superior political or social rank. So it was a sort of a mark of respect for what you had achieved on behalf of the Republic on the battlefield. So that's quite an interesting sort of idea that we keep today to this, you know, if someone with a Victoria Cross, you salute them, they don't have to. I think that's right. That's right. Anyway, I'm not sure. Now, below that was the Corona Castrensis, or the camp crown, which was the first person who'd entered an enemy camp. They tend to happen far more commonly. And even in the late Roman Empire, you find that people are doing these exploits and there's no mention of this crown occurring at that point in time. And you do wonder whether they fall out. I'm thinking 6th century AD under the Byzantine Empire. Whether that would be something we're just not told about, or whether they've completely replaced that system, it's unclear. The Corona Muralis, or the mural crown, which is for the first soldier on an enemy wall, which again has a sort of a spurring effect of you want to be the first one on the wall because you will get that reward from your general. And so in that regard, these sort of become more common. You know, every time there's a siege of an enemy city, someone's going to be first on the wall. Every time there's a battle where the enemy camp is reached, there's going to be someone who's going to be the first into the enemy camp. And you get those sorts of crowns are quite common in coinage, with slightly different meanings, sort of meaning that depicting the patron god or goddess of a particular city wearing that crown. You have a Corona Navalis, which is the naval crown, which is the first soldier who boarded an enemy vessel. Agrippa got one of those. A Corona Aurea, which is the gold crown, which was awarded to a man who killed an enemy in single combat. Now, that's not necessarily the enemy commander. That's just an enemy in single combat. Now, the funny thing about that one is our understanding of Roman warfare, of course, is not phalanxes. That was the last question. Legions fighting in, you know, centuries or cohorts or maniples, not entering into single combat. And yet, throughout the history of the Republic, we get evidence that, well, hang on a minute, that's a single combat. Some people reject those and say they're a sort of a heroic throwback put into a narrative fictitiously. But then you're like, hang on, there's a crown to award someone for killing an enemy in single combat. Single combat must have been happening. And whether that's in a phase, I know that's a very unpopular word for warfare, you know, at the beginning of a battle, or whether when warfare has degenerated into more of a melee, not a Hollywood melee, where everybody's fighting one-on-one combats, there's no structure or discipline at all. But at some point when there's a bit of confusion, maybe there are single combats going on, we're not sure. But the fact that there's a crown to award you if you kill the enemy, A, says it must have happened, and B, tells you they didn't frown upon it as being, that's not very Roman. It's like, well, no, I get a gold crown. What are you talking about? I'm very Roman. So that's that one. The next one is the Spola Opima, which is the rich spoils, and that is for killing an enemy general in single combat. So there are only 5 instances of that in Roman history. So that's actually rarer still than the grass crown. And so you get that. Now, the funny thing about a lot of these crowns is that the sources give different names for them. So there might be several that have different names, but the same crown. There's a passage in Polybius book 6, which gives a whole bunch that nowhere else is recorded, but people normally trust Polybius. So often will say, well, it must have existed, even though no other source mentions it. And possibly Polybius got his wires crossed. So Polybius mentions a crown of the preserver, which sounds very similar to a corona civica for saving the life of a fellow citizen. He also talks about the awarding of a spear to a man who has killed an enemy and stripped his armor, a cup or horse trappings to cavalry. We don't know about this, you know, giving of a cup to someone. He says that the person who is the first to mount the walls is given a gold crown. So that sounds like it's a confusion between the Corona Aurea and the Corona Muralis. It's hard to know. And the thing, of course, he does say about these crowns, which is worth keeping in mind is that they are incentives to soldiers to perform similarly on the battlefield, and they are also very good PR to stir up the feelings of the people at home, that, you know, these are the kinds of men who are defending the Republic. So, in short answer to the question, I do believe that the Corona Gramineae was as rare as we are told, only 9 occurrences during the Republic, and that there's a whole series of such crowns that reward Roman soldiers for their virtue on the battlefield.